Hello and welcome to TreeStuff.com. This is our webinar. We're going to cover plant healthcare today. Really appreciate everyone joining us. Albert, our plant healthcare expert, is running a little bit late. He's just down the road. His flight was fogged in out of his home today, and then he had another delay in Philadelphia, but he is going to be here very shortly. So we'll get started with the official programming then. I'm really excited to do this PHC webinar. This is our third or fourth one this year and part of an expanded series that we're working on. We hope that you guys really like it. We want to ask a couple of questions while we have some time here, while we wait for Albert, and see what you guys are looking for in the webinar series. So this is a theme. You'll be able to vote during this webinar and also answer questions using some emoticons and the Facebook commenting function. So our first question in what you guys want in the webinar series is about topics for upcoming webinars. So you'll see the question on your screen. You can vote for either rigging, cabling, climbing, or PPE and communication. So go ahead and select with your emoticons what you see and make your choice there. Feel free to comment as well if you think that we should do things that are more outside or more inside or from the tree or live in a bucket. Give us your ideas. We'd love to hear them. Anything that we can do to improve these webinars and make them better is obviously our goal. So please do let us know. A couple more questions. We'll just throw those up on the screen. Do you think that the webinars should be more fun or more serious? You'll see those questions up on the screen now, and you guys can vote. I can't see it, but we're going to have to fix that. I need to be able to see it so I know what you guys see. We've received some feedback on the topics of the webinar. If you guys are interested in seeing more advanced or basic stuff or somewhere in the middle, give us a click with one of your emoticons when you see this pop up. And that'll get over to us. And last question is must-have CEUs, yes or no? Not all topics are eligible for CEUs through the ISA. So we've tried to focus on topics that we can get CEUs granted for. But if you guys feel like you would tune in and watch a webinar without CEUs, please let us know, because that is also important to us. Kale, how did that all work? Did it work? Were people doing it? Yeah? Okay, cool. Are there any comments or questions so far? How's the audio? Guys, does everybody have good audio? Give me a thumbs up if you have good audio. Okay, cool. I hope I see lots of thumbs ups. Ricky, come on over here for a second. In our last webinar, Ricky walked through awkwardly because I asked him to, and it didn't make any sense, and it was funny. Ricky just, you can see he's all red in the face from driving so fast to go get Albert. Rick,
still got the glasses on too.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to help.
Ricky's our controller here at TreeStuff.
Hi.
He's also a customer service liaison and the human resources liaison and building services manager. And Ricky helps make a lot of the things that we accomplish possible, including skipping out on a meeting early, which we won't tell Jonda, his boss, that he wasn't actually there for the tail end.
And hopefully she's not watching.
He skipped out early today, and he drove to the airport, and he resisted the police and the parking maids and the meters and all that stuff. And
you should have seen the chase. It was crazy.
He got Albert here, and I think that Albert is actually ready to take this over for us. Ricky, thank you. Thank you very much. Albert, come on in. Come on in. We're just getting warmed up here. Okay, see these marks on the floor? This is where you can stand for this shot. And then over here, if you need to use the board, stand on this side. Okay, cool.
Sorry for being late here,
Yeah.
Commercial air travel.
No problem. How's Albert's audio? Albert, say hi to people.
Hey, good to be here. Sorry for the little delay in the show.
Any problems with Albert's audio, anybody? No? Okay, we're really focused on audio, Albert, so make sure you speak clearly. I see you're shaven this time, so we won't have the beard issue that we had.
Don't need a repeat of that.
We don't need a repeat. All right, Albert, take it away.
All right, beautiful.
Thanks for watching, guys.
Thanks, guys. All right, we'll just jump right into it. So this is Speak. Yep, so what we're going to cover here is the three basic points that we're on chemicals, how to choose them, things to be considering, legislative aspects of it, as well as what's the best product to make the most money, as well as control the pest the best. You got to start from the very beginning. All right. Sorry, we're having a little audio issue. This webinar, we're going to go over three main things. The first being chemicals, how to choose them, how to apply them, the legislative aspect of it, as well as what's going to make you the most money. I know that a lot of guys out there, this is more shot towards the basic to intermediate level for advanced plant health care. That might be a topic of discussion later, but at the moment, this is really just basics, just so everyone has the strong foundation and that we're all speaking the same language. The second chapter that we're going to cover is the fertilizers and what we need to know about them and when we can apply them and what the general benefits to all that is. And then the third thing is, why should you even consider adding PHC to your business? You already have a profitable business with removals and pruning and all of the other aspects of tree care. Why even bother with any of this? And also, if you do decide to pick this up, how are we going to make money at it? How are we going to bid? What's the easiest way to slide into it? I don't know, some of you might know me, some of you probably don't. The reason that I'm up here is I just want to give you a little background on me and what my knowledge base comes from. I am a certified arborist out of North Carolina. I did grow up in a greenhouse where my mother was in a greenhouse her whole life. My father's a turf grass professor, so it's the family business to get into plants. For the last 15 years, I've been in the green industry, whether that be arboriculture or fine turf management for tennis and croquet lawns, greenhouse production, and a little bit of landscape. So my knowledge base is a mile wide and an inch deep on that. Also, my formal education came from North Carolina State University, and we majored in horticulture there with a minor in turf. Currently, I'm licensed in 25 states for different certain aspects, whether it be commercial application or pesticide sales, as well as Ontario. So I know that we usually get a lot of questions on what the licensing regulations are. I can speak to a lot of them, but I can't, I'm not licensed in every state, so I can't speak to all of them. And then throughout all my green life, I've been doing commercial applications for a plethora of diseases and different types. So that's a little bit about me. My fiance will be remiss if I don't mention that this picture I have up here, this is what proper pollarding looks like at Disney World. I'm terrible at making her take pictures of nerdy tree things, so I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to that. The first chapter we're going to talk about is chemicals and just how to use them, how to apply them, what do we need to be thinking about when we're doing these things. Just covering the basics very quickly, there's two types of chemicals at the broadest spectrum. There's general use chemicals, which don't require a license to be sold or applied in most states. That being said, if you're applying on somebody else's property for profit, 9 times out of 10, you need a license, even if it is general use. And the labels will tell you that, whether it be Roundup or acephate, or there's a long list of them. The other side is restricted use, and that requires a lot of reporting. So I have to have a license to sell it, you have to have a license to buy it, and the state often regulates that to the point where you have to report every year how much you've sold, how much you've applied, and this is going out of fashion with the chemical world, but there's still a lot of products that are restricted use, and the reason they are is they're either toxic or they're in a specific application range where there's high potential for damage, such as aquatic applications or near stream banks, any of those things that are targeted for that. A lot of those are restricted use, as well as if they're they're dangerous to apply, such as soil fumigants, something that could get away from you and cause harm. The thing about being into PHC is we really should be all speaking the same language, and you'll hear me talk about all these as we go through the webinar. But when I'm talking, I just want to make sure we're all speaking the same language here. Pesticide is anything that kills a pest. So that could be anything below here on the slides. If it kills insects or a fungus or weeds, and weeds are anything that is a plant out of place. If we don't want that there, that qualifies that as a weed, and anything that kills that as an herbicide. So your customers will certainly not be speaking in these terms all the time, but if you can just get in the habit of calling everything by its proper name, you can really make a big step up, in regards to your competition. So now that we kind of get a grip on that, why are we even going to use pesticides? Like, why do we need them at all? There's a thing called IPM, I'm sure most of you are familiar with, integrated pest management, and this is a practice that we think about on how to control pests. So you want to use the least intrusive manner possible. So that would be for weeds, physical removal of it. If it's a pest that you can squish and it's just that one, doing that instead of before we get into pesticide. Cultural controls would also include making sure that you have a good fertilization plan in place, that the soil is being tested, it's not compacted. Any of these things that make the tree as healthy as possible to fight off all of this, those are things you want to be doing. So if we go into that, if the cultural controls aren't effective, then we got to use pesticides. If we've tried all that and we're still getting pest pressure, we need to step up the game here. If the damage to the host plant is unacceptably high, that kind of ties into that IPM. They have this concept called an economic threshold, which is, if you think about it, say I know this isn't really trees, but if you were talking about a cornfield and you had $500 worth of damage to your cornfield because of the pest that was on it, you wouldn't want to spray it until the cost of the spray was $500, right? Because then you'd be losing money. You'd be spraying $500 and not getting your profit back. So this is the same thing we want to do in trees, but the scale is a little different. So like in cut flowers or ornamental lawns, Mrs. Jones, her economic threshold might be 0. It has to be perfect. If there's any damage at all, that's worth whatever the cost is to spray. So some customers will be that way where, I got this and I got to take care of it right now. Other customers, they won't be interested in taking care of anything until, a third of the trees defoliated. And this is just something you got to have a conversation with them about on deciding whether or not it's worth treating their trees. Obviously, if there's a risk to the tree that could kill the tree, then that spikes up the economic threshold where it might be worth it to do a lot to save it. The pest providing too much competition, that could be either physical competition like weeds, where you have this beautiful specimen tree and they're just letting the bed get overrun with weeds. That's we're hurting the tree's ability to take up water and nutrients. Or if you have scrub trees overhanging a specimen tree, any of these would be means for using an herbicide to take it out. And then if the health of a specimen tree, that's again something that might not be at the economic threshold, but we got to take care of it anyway, just because it's the cornerstone of the house. There's only one big tree in the front, or the kids play on a tire swing in the back, or there's special circumstances that would require a more aggressive treatment plan right out of the gate. Things not to use pesticides for. There's gray on this, shades of gray on this. When no pest is present, obviously we don't want to treat anything preventatively. If we don't have any pressure, then we're just putting chemicals into the environment for no reason that would also increase the chances of it being, the pest developing resistance to it. So you got to use your best judgment on that. Like in North Carolina, there's no Asian longhorn beetle. There's no Asian longhorn beetle in 4 states around it. I'm not going to treat anything for Asian longhorn beetle preventatively because there's no need. That being said, in Virginia, one county has emerald ash borer and the county that I'm in doesn't, I know that they have it and it's moving my way. That might be the gray area of the pest isn't physically there at this moment, but you want to keep an eye on it. Technically, you're not supposed to do any applications until the pest is present. Also, a lot of people will use unidentified pests causing damage. If we don't know exactly what it is, we certainly don't want to apply any pesticides for it, because not only is it bad for the environment, but it could also be ineffective. Fertilizers or fungicides and bactericides or antibiotic agents treat two completely different things. However, the diseases, both the bacterial leaf spots and the fungal leaf spots, they look so similar, and unless you have them tested at a lab, it's almost impossible to differentiate between the two. So if we're not certain if it's bacterial or fungal, we shouldn't treat until we do know, just because maybe I put this application of fungus or fungicide on it, it's a $500 application, it turns out it's bacterial. Not only did the tree lose valuable time to be treated, I wasted all my money on it, or the customer wasted all their money on it, and the customer's going to lose faith in me because it's not controlling anything, and there'd be no reason for it to be controlled with the wrong product. The best way to go about that is, in every state, there's always an ag school, whether that be Ohio State or NC State or West Virginia University. There's a ton. You'd be more familiar with your local one than I would be. However, they all have extension agents where that's their job, is you call them up and say, hey man, I got this, this pest on my tree. I don't really know what it is. I don't want to apply something wrong. Will you come out and take a look at it? And they'll either come out and take a look at it or tell you, why don't you send me a leaf sample or a root sample, whatever the affected area might be. So they'll test it at their lab and they'll tell you, hey, yeah, this is bacterial leaf scorch, and this is how I go about treating it. And most of the time it's a small fee. I know soil tests are often free, or again, a small fee. It depends on your state, but all of these are just good to be familiar with, get a relationship going with your local extension agent, because the guy that lives down the street from you is probably the best person to tell you, oh, well, this is new in our area. I mean, they're being paid by the state to be up on this to prevent damage. So just keep that in mind when you're applying. Don't use something that you don't need to use. Also, if you're applying it to a fruit tree, you might not want to use it. If you know that you're going to be trying to consume the fruit, you'd have to check the label to see what your options are there. If you're not, Mrs. Jones has this beautiful peach tree, but she never eats the fruit, but she's using it really as an ornamental tree, then you might have a different course of options for pesticides. You might be good to go. And then, I know we talked about it just a little bit ago, but sensitive ecological areas, whether it be wetlands or streams or lakes. I mean, you guys have a good grip on this. Obviously, we don't want to be spraying into the water table. So when we think about this on how to choose a product, we got a few things to consider. And a lot of this is repetitive, but it's really important to really have a good grasp on this. You want to be certain of what pest you're treating and on what tree. That goes back to the fungicide bacterial agent. If I'm not sure, I want to make sure that I find out before I spend good money and time, spraying in the wind, essentially. You want to whenever possible, use the least hazardous material. So we'll get into this in the next slide or two, but all the chemicals have a hazard level to them. And if you have two products that both control the pest well, both are allowed to be applied in the way you want to apply them, and both have the same efficacy, and one's danger and one's caution, you always want to pick the lower one. And we'll go over which the rankings are just here in a second. But always use the safest product you can that still gets the job done. Length of residual control, that's where you kind of get into the pest specifically. If, say I have a caterpillar infestation and I know that they only feed for this 2-week window, and if I can get them all now, they're not coming back till next year, then I might need something with a real short residual activity. I don't need it for the whole year because they're only going to be here for 2 weeks. Whereas, so if I had, emerald ash borer, I know that we get larvae in the spring and they come back in the fall. We really need to have 2 years, or we need to have a year of control out of this. That way, if we miss time it, we still have coverage, as well as, say the pest comes back in a week earlier or 2 weeks earlier due to weather, then we're still covered, versus if we only have, a 2 week window and they stay late and their product's already up the tree and gone by the time they get there. We want to avoid that for sure. Consult the label. The label is actually the law. You can't do anything unless the label says you can do it. And if you're applying off label, you can be fined. It's all common sense stuff, and it's dry reading, but it's all crystal clear. Each product can be used for this certain pest, and this is the way you can apply it, and these are the rates. So just make sure that you're reading that, and we got a great website for you here in the next slide, or 2 slides, to make sure that we know where to get them and how to read them. And then license is needed. As I mentioned before, almost every state has to, if you're going to apply it for commercial gains, or you're getting paid, then you need a license. And they're very unsympathetic to, well, I didn't charge for the pesticide application, I just charged for the tree pruning, and I threw in the pesticide application for free. They're not game for that. If you have a pesticide application business, you just make sure that you're following the law on that one. They're not difficult laws to follow. Most of them are all common sense. Just be sure that you're aware of them and have the proper licenses. This gets kind of tricky. We spoke about general use pesticides. Those are general use pesticides for the whole nation, but states have the ability to upregulate as they see fit. For example, Safari, which is dimethyfuran, it's a really great broad spectrum insecticide. That's general use everywhere except New York State. So if you're in New York State, then it's a restricted use. So that might change your reporting logs, or if you're selling applications there, you got to be able to report how much you used, whereas perhaps in your state, the general use ones, you can just not report on them. All of this is, of course, state by state, so you just make sure you're checking with your local, the state chemist, or the Department of Agronomy would be able to point you in the right direction. And then storage and reporting. Obviously, you want to make sure that you have this stored correctly, whether that be, it needs to be a lock and key, or it just needs to be separate from, the common area of your shop, or does it need to even be, stored with spill absorbent? There's different requirements for the more advanced or dangerous chemicals that we don't use too much. Most of the common stuff that 99% of guys use, you just have to use common sense and just follow the letter of the law. It's very easy. So we were talking about labels. Everything on a label is the law, and this is what it covers. What pest does it control? If it's not on there, you can't spray for it. So like, say I have a label that says, it controls emerald ash borers and beetles and caterpillars, but it doesn't say anything about moths. So if you get caught spraying it for moths, you're applying off label, and that's a finable offense. So you just want to make sure you're using the product for what it's intended for, because there's been testing done on it, and we can have a good idea of what it's going to do in the environment there. How to be applied. This is really important with the tree care industry, because there's several ways you can apply pesticides, and we'll cover this here in a bit, but whether it's a canopy spray or a basal drench or a bark spray or a tree injection, it'll tell you what you can use. Some products have a label for all of those. Some of them you can only spray, some of them you can only drench, some of them you can inject and drench but not spray. It's just whatever the manufacturers determine the way that they'd like to have it applied and what they've been able to get through the EPA, then you want to make sure that you're following that, and the label tells you exactly, as well as how, silly stuff like how much do I use, how much you should be applied, and that also applies to within a month or a certain time frame. You know, for some of these fungicides, these funguses are really hard to control in some cases, so you'll have to make an application now, and if you don't get it at all, you can only make applications in certain intervals. So the label might say you can apply, this is the rate, and then you can apply every 14 days or 14 to 21 days, and then it'll usually say not to exceed, you know, whatever it says, 21 gallons per year. So just keeping that in mind, say you're really, you know, you have something that's really tough, then you just want to be sure that you're in the big window as well, where, you know, I've done it 4 times, and that 5th time I think I need that application, but the label says, you know, you only have 21 gallons this year, and I'm already up to there. So you just want to make sure that, and that helps the environment as well, as some of the times the tree or whatever your target will react poorly to just massive volumes of it. So just keep that in mind as well. If there are any special considerations to think about, this is particularly focused on when you can spray and what's in the area. There is this big dust up of neonics, neonicotinoid being linked to bee kill. The jury's still out on that one. And all the big bee kills that we've got reports of, the biggest thing is the applicators all sprayed it against the label where it says don't spray where pollinators are and don't spray with open flowers. So, you know, if you're spraying something else and it drifts and you're in the yard and it gets on flowers that are being pollinated by bees, that could be a detriment. I'm positive we're going to get tons of feedback on the neonics in that controversy. But also first aid, some things, pesticides are just a wide range of products, right? So some things are corrosive, some things are toxic, some things, they're all over the place. So, you know, just being aware of what you should be doing. Some things you need to induce vomiting right away. Some things that's like the worst thing you could possibly do. But instead of keeping this all in your head and thinking, you know, what did I read, you know, 2 months ago in a stressful situation, just keep it on hand so you can reference it, so you can make quick decisions should an accident arise. You know, there's no way that, you know, you can keep all of this information in your head, and you just want to make sure you have the best information in front of you, and the label is certainly where to get that. If we look at this, I don't know where the screen is, but if we look at this website down here, cdms.net / labels msds / lm default, that is a tremendous website. Okay, oh.
Link is in the chat.
The link is in the chat, okay. But if we pull it up here, this is a beautiful website where we can go search by brand name if we want, or anything. So if we just typed in, we'll do Safari here. It'll pull up the label, as well as any of the SDS sheets, and as well as you can see here, they have a special label for New York basil trunk spray. All of these labels, the 24Cs, and there's a couple other random numbers that they put on there. But in any case, those are all special labels that the EPA has issued for special products. So say the original label doesn't include powdery mildew, but it's actually great on powdery mildew. They found that out after they got the label printed. They'll issue a supplemental label to let you use that product for that disease. This is just a tremendous, they got everything on this website. So you might want to put that in your favorites and keep that in mind. It's a lot easier, especially, you know, you get the chemicals out, and I know we've all done this, where, you know, pour them, you spill a little bit, you clean it up, but now the label is unreadable, or you got a new guy that takes they're always stuck to the bottle. If you take that off and then you put it in the safe spot, you know, and then you lose it. So this way, you always have a copy of the label, and you can even get it up on your phone, you know, if you're out in the field. And then the signal words. This is what we're talking about, hazardous chemicals. The lowest, we'll start with the lowest one, caution. If the EPA bottled water, caution would be on the label. Everything is at least caution, no matter what's in it. The next one up is warning, so it has more potential to be dangerous, whether that be toxicity or maybe it's a little more corrosive. It doesn't necessarily mean anything as far as what the danger is, but it's a little more dangerous than caution. Danger, obviously, the next one up, and then danger poison indicates that it actually is toxic to consume. So danger might be it's corrosive. If you got it in your eyes, there'd be bad news. Whereas danger poison is, it's like, this is poisonous, pretty straightforward. That being said, the way that the chemical world is going to, they're really moving away from danger products. There's very few on the market, and warning is kind of going that way as well. Most of the warnings that we deal with in the tree industry are warnings because the manufacturer decided that they wanted to upregulate. It would fit into a caution, but if you upregulate into a warning and put a restricted use on it, now only you guys, only the qualified applicators can get to it. So you're not getting beat out by the homeowners buying up the chemical and applying it themselves. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's dangerous, it just is it is what it is. So just keep that in mind. If we have the choice between a danger and a caution and they both are the same efficacy, I'll always pick the caution. So just as a quick, there's a couple questions. We have questions at the end of this for credits. Just a couple quick, points here. If you look at a label, they'll always have the Reliant is the brand name. So whether think of that as like, it's a brand name, Coke, Pepsi, whatever. Then the active ingredient is actually what's doing the work there. So Reliance is actually the same active ingredient as Agrifos, so they both do the same things. The only difference would be the price, who made it, things like that. Sometimes it makes a difference. Some of the more, the big name chemical guys, Dow, Syngenta, they make better products than some of the offshore producers. They make cleaner tech that performs better. So you just got to play with it. Sometimes the cheaper generic works just as well, if not better. Sometimes it doesn't. You just need to, call somebody and see what they're showing. It'll also always have the signal word on there. So in this case, it's caution. And then it'll also tell you all the things we just covered about. So Phytophthora, that's the root rot that it's talking about, and then it'll tell you the application. You can either do a foliar spray or a soil drench. Bare root dip's probably more nursery than anything, but then it'll give you the rate for it and any application timing, whether, it says here, thoroughly wet the foliage, repeat is required for 14 to 21 day intervals. So, just how you should be doing. Is this a one-time application? Is this, multiple times? Just any information you would need to have. And then it'll also, Reliant is a pretty extensive label in that it'll have like 70 pages of, are you applying this on avocado trees? Is this for turf grass applications? Is this for, ornamental trees? So basically, most of the stuff we're doing is ornamental trees, whether it's a fruit or an oak or whatever, it's all ornamental to the label. These used to be called SDS sheets, safety data sheets. They used to be called MSDS sheets, and that changed, I guess, a year ago, 2 years ago. So you'll see that both in the literature, like what you saw on the website there, they had both. But this tells you a lot of what's the actual chemical. It's not actually concerned with the application or what it's allowed to be applied on. This is the safety aspect of it. So what is it made of? What's the actual active ingredient? That'll always be on there. Is it hazardous, and how so? Is it toxic to mammals? Is it toxic to fish? Is it corrosive? Will it, what's the hazard there? Is there any storing and shipping requirements? I know that this is, you probably aren't shipping too much, but how it comes to you, in some cases, the government regulates that if it's going to go UPS, then we have to pack it in spill absorbent material and wrap it in plastic. Some products don't have that, but in any case, you can find out if you need that or not on the SDS sheet. And it'll also tell you the LD50, which is, it's interesting to know, especially if you have wary clients that are very sensitive to chemicals where they, it's a hard pitch to them. But this always, I've always found success in this, in explaining this to people to calm them down a little bit about, they think they get into watching the movies and all the chemicals are bad, and that's not the case at all. So LD50 stands for the lethal dose for 50% of the test population to perish. And you got a graph of that there. So aspirin, something that we take, no one has any qualms. You're never going to find, or you're not going to find too many people that, are as averse to people taking aspirin as they are to spraying chemicals around. But if we look at this, LD50 is always given as a weight per weight or a volume per volume if it's a gas. So aspirin, if you consume 200 milligrams per kilogram, 50% of the population would perish. So it's not that, it's a lot, but it's not a terrible amount of time. Whereas in comparison, acephate, which is an old school chemical that is fairly nasty, is way more. You'd have to consume so much more of it than aspirin. Table salt is often used in this where it's much lower than acephate as well. And just being able, the more informed you are about anything, whether it be proper pruning technique or chemicals, the more your customer is willing to buy into your brand. So just keep that in mind. So for this activity, we have it all on here. It was also on the last sheet that we had. Just be thinking about some of this stuff. If in the questions, we're going to ask you, things like this. What is the signal word for reliant? Obviously, you can see it on it right there. It's caution. How much of the active ingredient is present? When you look at the line of what the active ingredient is, it always tells you what % is present right next to it, and then it'll also tell you all the inert ingredients, essentially what they had to do to get it into the form it is, and whether or not that, what percentages. They don't actually have to tell you what they did, they just have to tell you that it's in there. So for example, amomectin benzoate, which is triage, that is naturally a powder. And so powders don't inject super well into trees, so they had to make it a liquid. So how they make it a liquid, all those other inert ingredients which put it into solution. So just be aware of that. Is it restricted? You'll see above the head, it's big, it's bold, it says restricted use. You can't miss it, you'd have to be blind to miss it. People miss it all the time. But that's always on the first page of the label as well. And then we kind of got a little...
Albert, can I come in and talk for a second?
Absolutely.
Just give you a breather?
Yeah.
Okay. So you guys and girls have been watching, you've seen that we've been playing around with our titler a little bit. It's a new piece of software for Gail and Carson to play with, and we are learning it. We're trying to figure out these test questions and how to build more interaction in. We're going to have some more silly questions about Albert, like the one that we just put up. But we're also going to have 5, maybe 4, I don't know, official questions. We're pulling these straight from the CEU test. If you answer all of them that we ask throughout the entire broadcast, are there going to be 4 or 5, Kale? There's going to be 5 of them. If you answer all 5 of them and you get them correct, we're going to take all the people that got all 5 of them correct, and we're going to pick one of them to win this this new Notch chainsaw scabbard. So this is like $220 or something. Ultra high weight molecular polyethylene. Had this laying around. So yeah, if you answer all 5 of the questions, one of which will be coming up on the screen very shortly. They're not necessarily things you've covered already though, Albert. So you may need to have a little bit of knowledge or use your Google foo to figure this out. But if you get all 5 of them right, we will pick one of the people that got all of them right at random, and that person will win this scabbard right here. Okay? Is that cool?
Absolutely.
Awesome. I'm gonna just like maybe set this right here or something. Oh man, do you think you can not knock that over? I'm not even sure if it's in the frame or not.
That's a big talk.
Thanks, Albert.
Yep, no problem.
Man, you're doing great.
All right. So, and the other questions that we're going to be asking is just, can you read it? I goofed here and put the picture over front, but what it should say is how much did you apply for the 5 top throw, which we already covered as a drench. And then it'll tell you here what it is. So we talked about all these, so now we know what the safety aspect of the chemical is, how we can find out where the pest information is, what it kills, what it doesn't kill, how we should apply it, what are we allowed to apply it. So the ways that we talked about already, we got spray, we have drench, and we have injection, both trunk injection and root injection. All of these are, I would say, the three top ways that folks will use to get pesticides or anything into the tree, and they're all through different methods. As we go through it here, spray is probably the most common, or what people are most familiar with, and like everything, it has pros and cons. So the best way to go about this is to soak this up and then think about what best fits your business. So sprays are really easy to mix up. You put both, the water and the product in the tank. You have mechanical or jet agitation. Excuse me, got the hiccups there. And in any case, it's super easy. You put it in the truck, you turn the agitation on, you follow the instructions, you're off and running. You can get great coverage with it. That's a double-edged sword though, because if you have the two types of pesticides that are most common would be systemic, which means they get into the tree and then move through the tree's vascular system, and you get 100% coverage on that essentially. And then the other one are contact. So essentially, if you don't get pesticide on that part of the tree, it's not going to get covered. So whether that be you're spraying from underneath, if the pests are on the top of the leaves, it's hard to get good coverage there. But you might not, if you have a systemic, that's no problem, or something called a translaminar application, that goes through the leaf, but it wouldn't be enough to go through the whole vascular system. So that would be something you'd want to just, and your label will tell you if that's the product you're using or not. And this is by far the widest range of products that you have available. Everybody's label pretty much allows for a spray, and if a particular company doesn't have a spray label, there's 10 other products that have the same active ingredient and the same formulation that do allow a spray. The cons, as we talked about, if you have a bad applicator that can't, color inside the lines, then you're going to have bad coverage. Also drift, because naturally, especially when you get into tall trees, 30, 40, 50, 60 foot trees, and above, you're going to have a lot of pressure through the spray, and you get it up there and it's just going to turn into a mist, which is what you want to get good coverage, but at the same time, you have a real windy day or rain, you can have a lot of pesticide non-target movement. So you can just be aware of that. You want to be sure that you're spraying on calm days that is suitable for this. Requires special equipment, a spray truck. I know Chemical Container out of Florida makes great spray trucks. They're very expensive, and as long as they're like a crane though. If you have them running every day, you can be making a lot of money with them, but they don't make you any money sitting at the shop. This is something where a lot of the bigger PHC firms, they grow into, where a truck might cost whatever it costs, 100 grand or 120 grand. You might want to start smaller with just a skid unit, which could be 3 grand to 7 grand, or it's a sliding scale, and you can pay what you want to pay for them. But that's just one option. There's also a social stigma to it. If you go out and you don't do anything except get a sprayer and spray water into the air, like this guy's, I can't confirm he's spraying water, but if he is, your neighbor's doing that, you can guarantee that Mrs. Jones is going to come over and ask you what you're doing and want a really good reason why, and you're probably not going to be able to convince her that this isn't the apocalypse, which she thinks it is. In any case, also, some states require that you give pre-notification because of this stigma. So say I want to come treat on Tuesday, maybe a week before, maybe 3 days before, depending on the regulations, I have to go canvass, I have to send somebody out, and I have to go knock on doors or put door hangers on saying, hey, I'm going to come spray 32 Shady Lane on next Tuesday from 8 to 10. Whatever it is, you have to let them know. There's a lot of other methods that you don't have to do that with. Just because of the drift, you get it on someone's paint and it stains the paint, you can really cause some damage there. But if you're out in the middle of a wide open spaces, this is a very quick and effective way to cover a ton of trees, and it really gives good coverage if you have the right guy behind the hose. Drench. Drench is also super easy. I mean, it couldn't be any easier. It's almost comical. You pour the chemical in the drench tank as well as the water to the right mix ratio. You mix it up and you pour it out, whether that be with a hose or, you know, in this case, this guy's doing it in a bucket, and he's gonna evenly distribute it around the flare roots all the way out to the drip line to make sure that the roots take it up and it moves through the tree. This would be a classic case of systemic pesticides or fertilizers that would be applied in this manner. And you get great coverage because you're covering the entire root system and the tree is actually taking it up itself, so you know you're getting great coverage. Some of the cons, if you're in drought conditions, trees do not really want to take up this massive volume of water, and they're not able to take it up as quickly as they need to. You know, some of the pesticide or fertilizer could get bound in the soil. Other plants could be taking it up. There's just a lot of different ways. You'd really want to water the tree first, maybe 2 days before or a day before, to make sure that all the water's pumping through it to give yourself the best uptake. And it does require a lot of water, whether that's, you know, 50 gallons or 200 gallons, or depending on the size of your tree. You know, sometimes it's hard to carry that much water with you, or, you know, if you're lucky, the customer will let you use their water supply. All of these are just factors you got to keep in mind when you're doing this. And if you're doing the bucket method, we can be very honest that it looks unprofessional. It looks like, you know, a homeowner, hey man, I'm going to mix this up in the trash can and then kick the trash can over. Not exactly, you know, white glove service. That being said, if they're not home, or that's the best way to do it, or, you know, it's something quick like that, or this is the best product that fights this disease, you know, it's something certainly to keep in your repertoire. Injection, now this is both soil and trunk injection. The pros of it, you get great coverage, and it's wicked easy to use. You know, the soil injection would require a spray truck, you know, to have pressure to pump it into the soil. A lot of the times people do this with emerald ash borer or a lot of the boring insects to make sure that the roots take it all up, and that's all done with a spray rig and subsoil application. And we'll touch on the spacing for all that and the exact fundamentals of it when we talk about fertilizer here. But there's no drift, and a lot of the states that do require pre-notification for spray don't for injection. And particularly trunk injection, you know, say they didn't take their dog in and he's in the backyard, but you got to be in the front yard. That'd be too much to spray, but you know, your application could be ruined or your schedule could be ruined by not being able to do that application, as well as now I got to come back, I got to pre-notify. Whereas with the trunk inject in particular, you know, I can be doing it here and we can be having a barbecue 20 feet away, and since the product is only in the injection or in the tree, you know, there's no drift, there's no off-target movement, and really no one's going to be bothered by it. It does look professional. Every time I go do this, where I can be seen, like someone sees me, either the customer or, you know, someone walking by, they always stop and they always ask questions, which is both good and bad depending on how busy your day is. But I never get the same reaction to this as I do with, you know, a drench or a spray, where it's, you know, oh, that's so cool, I didn't know you could do this with trees, you know, just more positive. And then it opens the dialogue, so you can, you know, inform the neighbors that, hey, you know, we're treating this. It gives you an opportunity to sell to the neighbor, hey, these guys are treating their trees to keep them, you know, I noticed that you have the same thing in your yard, you know, if you want, when I'm done with this, I'll give you a quote. It opens up a lot more of a dialogue than, you know, someone in a respirator and a jumpsuit and the full thing. So just, if you don't, but it is slower than spray in a lot of cases, just because, especially with, you know, high volume work, it's all depending on what you're doing. And then we talked about no non-target movement, so it stays in the tree or in your bottle, that's it. The cons, people get really worked up about drilling into a tree for trunk injection, but it compartmentalizes and uses code it just like any other part of the tree. It might not be as aggressive of a coat at, say, at the meristem tips, or the most vigorous tissue, but all these holes from all the tests that we've done, and just the years that they've been doing this, they close up wicked quick. You won't even notice it after a year. Especially if you use plugs. Some systems use plugs, some systems don't. Depends on which system and what tree you're using. Stuff that takes things up really quick, ring porous species, you might not be able, and as I say, it's a moist day with a lot of sun and the wind's whipping, so you're moving a ton of water through this tree, might not need to use plugs. Something that's a lot slower, like any of your conifers, you probably ought to use a plug just because you're going to lose a couple mils of product out of your injection site just due to drippage if you don't use a plug, and by that time it's the cost of the plug, plus it looks a lot more professional when, as soon as, everyone does this, as soon as you're off site, whether it's pruning or a removal or pesticide application, the customer always comes out and checks your work, and it's a lot cleaner to look and use plugs, and have even drilled holes, and just be a professional about it. The cons also include a smaller selection of chemicals. This is a relatively new method, 10, 15 years, versus spray, which has been around since the beginning of pesticide application. And it can be pricey just because of the special labels that needed to go through EPA to make this happen. One thing I didn't mention about injection is it's such a reduced cost on labor. You can send some guy around with an injection kit in a Prius or his bike if you had to, versus sending out a big chip truck and a chipper and 5 guys. You can really turn a lot of volume with one guy, and it's a lot less upfront cost. So some of the other things we're going to move into the spring treatments. I just picked 4 things that you could be selling right now to do this spring to jump into this. And the way I would go about it is, I don't know everything about plant health care. I don't think you can ever know everything. But the way I would start a business in this is I'd pick 1 or 2 things that are in your area. That's a quick Google or call your extension agent. Hey man, what are you getting the most calls on? Like what's really common around here? And then be an expert at that. So like in Texas, I do oak wilt. You could run a business, you could start a business just doing oak wilt. Granted, it's not going to be retirement money the first year, but as you get more comfortable with the applications, you build your confidence with your customers. They come and look at you, and eventually they'll be telling their friends and looking for other stuff. Hey, I know you did my oak trees. What is this? Can you treat this as well? And this gets you back on the property. You can only cut a tree down once. You can be doing these treatments every year, every couple years, depending on when it is, as well as if you get on for this, you can work on selling them a fertilizer program or pruning work for other aspects of their trees. It really is a good foot in the door. So just pick 1 or 2, whatever you feel comfortable with, and if you're really comfortable with it, then this is you already know what you're doing, so don't worry about it. But so here's a couple of the big ones. Oak wilt is a killer. It's really hard to control, and the tree's just not going to cure itself. We got to do something. So these are 2 very classic textbook photos of what oak wilt looks like. So we'll go into it. You always start from the margins in on the browning, with the exception of live oaks. Live oaks go the other way around. They have interveinal necrosis, and it starts from the inside and goes out. But this is a classic where you can just start seeing it, essentially the death creep in. And it always starts in the tops of the trees, and you'll just be able to, this is a very easy one to spot, and red oaks seem to get it a little worse than the live oaks. The treatment, almost all these fungicide products, almost all the fungus and bacterial stuff, it's going to be a 2-pronged approach. We're going to treat with, in this case, propiconazole or Reliance, Alamo, any of these, that spectrum, these are all great, whether you want to do a spray or an injection, and as long as you're getting good coverage of it, that's all that matters. But you want to do that in conjunction with sanitation pruning, anything that has the disease, you want to, come back a couple inches from where you see the disease end and prune it out, and to make sure that you take, and clean all your tools between each cut would certainly be great, ideal, but, absolutely between every tree. And that way, you're not spreading it around. Same idea as why you don't spike live trees. You could just, you could be spreading disease. There's other reasons as well, but also some states require that if you prune in certain time windows, that you use wound sealant. It's becoming more and more aware that different wound sealants react differently to trees, like tree coat. Anything that's tar based is better than nothing, but you really should be looking into the 21st century of wound coverage, which would be like lac balsam, where it doesn't create that that membrane that traps moisture in there. So like latex paint is also sometimes commonly used, and that really, you're creating a greenhouse on top of and you can induce more rot, whereas lac balsam, definitely the way to go on that. But since there are some requirements to it, you just got to make sure that you're up to date on your local requirements from whatever it is. Fire blight is very, very, very common, especially in the apple family, the Malus genus. Anything that is in that same family is susceptible to fire blight, and it's super easy to tell what it is. It's called fire blight, and it looks exactly like that, where someone took a blowtorch to the tips of the tree and they get all browned and curled up, and then they'll do this shepherd hook number, and you can kind of see that in the bottom photo there, where it's starting to bend over. But very easy to identify. If it's an apple, this is a good chance is what it's got. So this is a classic case of you got to know what it is, or you're going to waste your money on applications. This is a bacteria, and so you could put all the fungicide in the world on it and it's not going to touch it. But once you can identify that it is a bacteria, you want to use abiotic agents such as OTC, oxytetracycline. There's a couple other ones, but that's by far, I would say, the most effective way to go about it. So you'll see that the death come back from the tips back, and eventually it consumes the whole tree. You also see cankers go up and down the limb, and so when this gets bad enough, the tree's going to die. So good sanitation when pruning, that's where the cankers come into play. You want to make sure that you'll see the death of the tree come so far, and then if you look closely, you'll see cankers a little farther, and then when you get back, you'll see clear branch. You want to prune down here where there's clear branch and make sure that you're sanitizing your tools. So that's like, there's tool sanitizer, obviously a great purchase, especially in the aerosols. It's super quick and easy. Another way would be like a 10-to-1 bleach solution in water. That would also do it for you. Arbor OTC or any oxytetracycline would be the killer way to go for this. And because it is such an aggressive pathogen, you want to make sure that you're doing this. 1 year isn't going to do it. You're going to have 2 years, might be 3, depends on how good you are with the pruning. If you can prune it all out and pump it full of the oxytetracycline and you get really great control, the tree's not too far gone, it's really vigorous, you might be able to knock it out in 2 years, but I would be very surprised if you could get it in 1. Now, southern pine beetle, this is an Ips beetle, so you really could be doing this with any Ips beetle, but we're just focusing mainly on the southern pine here. It's very clear what a bad one looks like here, where this is like a terrible, this tree's dead, don't even bother treating it type, with all the frass coming out of the wound holes, as well as the Ips beetles, or a lot of them, especially the southern pine, will carry a fungus with it, and it's called blue stain fungus because it leaves a blue stain in the wood. So that's really what kills the tree. I mean, the beetles put galleries and they chew the xylem and flow them up, and that's bad. But what really is the killer is the blue stain fungus plugs it all, so the tree can't get water up or down, or nutrients down. So dieback on the limbs. I mean, any of these funguses are similar, where you get a plugging of the xylem and phloem. It just starts dying back. So anytime you see death in the top of a tree, or an even shrinking of good tissue, that's something you want to be looking at, just to see what's what's causing this? Is it girdling roots? Is it, what is the issue here? Well, there'll be galleries because the bugs, the beetles get in there and they eat and reproduce and do the galleries will end up making the bark slough off because they shoot out everything underneath of it. And then the blue stain fungus will grow in the xylem. This one is hard because like a lot of trees, when they start getting stressed, they put out pheromones that alert the pests that they are stressed, and then the pests are attracted to that. So the best case in all of these is obviously have the healthiest trees under the least stress in great management programs whenever you can. But if you can't do that, you want to destroy the infected wood. We had a lot of problems in the US here with movement of wood and spreading pathogens and bugs. EAB is probably the poster child for this, where it came in on one pallet and now it's across the entire Northeast, and I think I saw it as far west as Colorado, and I know it's down at least to Georgia. So and it's just devastating. So don't move firewood. Educate everyone you know on that one. The best way to go about this is what we were talking about, the gray area. Obviously, if you see any, you want to apply right then. If my neighbor has this in their yard, I might apply it even though I haven't seen the frass holes in my tree right off the bat. But in any case, triage is a great one. That's 2 years of control. Safari, Merit, Imajet, all of those. The last three only give you a year of control. And the Safari and Merit, they can be sprays or drenches, whereas triage and Imajet are injections. Whatever floats your boat. This might be a case where spray would be good or drench, because it is hard to get injection up a conifer just based on their vascular structure. Gypsy moth, very, very big problem, especially last year. So many trees are getting defoliated because of this, and it's really easy to see. I mean, you could be driving down the road and see them, and you could be selling this a lot. This is a very easy to identify, very easy to control pest. You see almost total defoliation depending on where you catch it. If you catch it early, obviously they won't defoliate the whole tree. If it's late, then the whole thing will be bare. You see tan to brown egg masses, and once you see one of those, then it'll be very easy to identify. Even 20 miles an hour down the road, 30 miles an hour down the road, you'll be able to spot what trees you need to go and knock on doors and sell this to. And then you'll see strands of silk on chewed leaves as well. Again, proper tree health prevents a lot of this, but when you get these big numbers and you get all this massive pressure on these trees, even healthy trees are going to have a hard time fighting it off. But AceJet, if you get your timing down, AceJet is the quickest way to knock this down. You'll see results that day, end of day, perhaps while you're still on site, where it just goes through the tree super fast and starts killing it. That is a very short residual, maybe a month, 3 weeks. So if your timing is great, that's definitely the one you want to use. If you have serious trouble with this, like in the Northeast, where it's just year after year after year, that's where that gray area on preventative treatment gets in. I know that it's in this year, and I know that it's going to be back next year. The populations are just so high that it's a guarantee. So that's when you would want to use Safari or Merit or Triage, where that's Triage is 2 years, Safari and Merit just 1, but you get application to application 1 year. So that's chemicals. We're going to move on to fertilizers here. I assume the gentlemen in the back are taking down any questions that they see. If you have any, oh, you're good. All right, beautiful. So, shout them out if you got them, and then we're going to move on here to the basics of fertilizer. Fertilizer is really, yep. You got a question? Okay. What is it?
We have some questions.
And
All right, so Chris Hoffner wants to know what you think about the Moget.
Moget. I like Moget. It's, I believe, the oldest brand of tree injection in the arborist world. They have a great selection of products. The chemistry is really great, and they also offer their chemistry in bulk, where you don't have to necessarily buy the tree injection capsules. So say you really get into this full time, eventually the math works out where the capsules cost so much more than buying an injection kit that it doesn't make sense, but they're great. The trick with those is, you want to make sure that you're really using the right size drill bit and doing all the steps to get it, in the root zone, or the flare roots in the right angle. But Moshe is a great product. So is Tree Tech. In the capsule world, those are the two big hitters that I would recommend.
All right, Jason Scott has a little tougher hitting question. Jason graduated with his horticulture degree at Clemson in 14, so he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of any tree sealants that are not only proven to work, but also proven to inhibit coated, proven not to inhibit coated. When he went through college at Clemson, he said there were no sealants listed that fit this description that he knew of, nor did they ever use sealants in his time at Bartlett. If there is a sealant that only works, but is proven not to inhibit coated, can you please share that with me? I know you mentioned lac balsam. Can you talk a little bit about why you think lac balsam maybe meets those, or if it doesn't?
As far as inhibiting coated, anytime you put something on top of, the wound wood, we're going to inhibit coated a little bit. That being said, well, let's start it this way. If it was up to me, I wouldn't ever use wound sealant unless the state required me to. I know in Texas they require you to seal the wounds. It's not a great practice in general, but if you have to use it because the state says you have to use it, I would prefer to use something that isn't tar-based, so that it breathes a little better and you have less moisture in the cut. But yeah, you're right, it's not. At state, it was the same thing. You would only be using it if you were forced to. It's not best practice to paint wounds with anything. Lac balsam would be the lesser of all the evils, just because it does have a little bit of a breathable membrane to it, so you're not trapping all that moisture and causing rot. But yeah.
All right, good question, Jason. If you don't like his answer, we'll post his address at the end of this. You can go see him. Kayla Wheeler wants to know, at what point do you treat for southern pine beetle, and at what point is the host tree just too far gone?
The first one's really hard. Second one's really easy. When to treat, you got to see the pests in your area. Anytime in the spring when you have good uptake, if you're doing systemic treatments, which would probably be the most effective way. That way, you get great coverage of them. So it depends on where you are. But yeah, anytime in the spring when you're getting good uptake, whether that be, in North Carolina, we had 60 degrees yesterday, and things were moving through the conifers. In the Northeast, it could be another couple weeks. Hard to say there. But as far as when it's too far gone, especially with these boring beetles, it's a real rough guess. But if you're using triage or something that is as effective, whether it be merit, whatever, if you get a good effective control of it, I would say you're pretty much good to go up to a quarter of the canopy loss. If you're a quarter or less, no problem. If you get more than a quarter, you probably got a good chance up to, I'd say, 40%. If you get 40 or 50% canopy loss, I don't know that I would even bother. Offer it to the homeowner, but you're probably going to be selling a removal to them instead of a treatment. But that's a good way to just go through and here's the price. I don't think it's going to work. Here's a removal. Let them know what they're dealing with. So is that.
All right, yeah, that's great. Thank you, Albert. So we're about halfway through here. Albert's going to get started on question 2. Yes, I do have the best sticker game of anyone you've ever met, for sure. No doubt about that. Reminder, we've got this awesome notch chainsaw scabbard we're going to give away. So if you get all 5 of the official questions right, you're going to be in a raffle to win this. One person will win at random from all the people who got all 5 of the questions right. So that's pretty cool. And then I just wanted to take a second and tell everybody a little bit about Fallen Families. I mentioned this during our last webinar. You obviously know about it, heard about it at the office, but the Fallen Families Foundation is a fund that we started, Cheryl Inc. started, to benefit families and individuals who have been plagued by tragedy on the job site and end up in a situation where they've lost an income stream for their household. So you can go to fallenfamiliesfund.org and you can learn more about it. There's a holding page right there. We're building the website, but we have applied for all of our federal tax IDs as an official nonprofit. We put a $25,000 grant in ourselves, the company did, to support it. We raised about $6,000 last year at TCIA, and Toby Cheryl wrote us a $5,000 check the day after we got our federal tax ID. So we've got over $30,000 in the kitty so far. We plan to use half of our fundraising to help build an endowment for future years for the charity, and then the other half for current year grants. So, you know, if you know anybody that's been struck by tragedy or taken off the job, please let them know. Or if you'd like to make a donation to it, you can go to treestuff.com, or I think there's even something on cheryltree.com you can check out. But you know, go to treestuff.com. In the What's New section or the Sales and Specials section, you'll see the donation. You can just add that to your cart when you buy something. It's tax-free. There's no sales tax on it or anything like that. So Fallen Families Fund, we're really excited for that. And I'm going to hand it back over to you. I appreciate you guys letting me do my shameless plug.
That's that's such an important thing to give back to the industry, and you know, I'm actually very proud that we're doing this.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's a cool thing to be a part of.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Albert. Continue.
All right, fertilization. Lot of misconceptions about fertilization. From the Scott's turf fertilizer has spent a ton of money trying to get everyone to fertilize their yard twice a year, and that's all well and good, but you know, turf isn't trees, and sometimes we just need to be thinking about, is this what we need to be doing? Is it good to be selling? It is a very profitable way and an easy sell, because people think, you know, I'd fertilize my grass, I should be doing my trees as well, or you know, your woody perennials, all of this. But you got to be cognizant of what we're really trying to do here. So will the plant grow faster or be healthier? If you're in a spot like, you know, it's in the devil strip, and you know, faster growth is just going to cause more issues for the tree, maybe that's not the time. If it's in the middle of the yard and, you know, we want a big shade tree, or, you know, we're having nutrient deficiencies because it's, you know, poor soil from new construction, any of these things, that would be a definite time to be fertilizing here. Does it have a nutrient deficiency? And we'll cover a few quick ones on the main NP and K on this, but if it has a nutrient deficiency, that's, you know, why does it have that? I talked earlier about soil tests and foliar tests with your extension agents. Certainly, before we do any fertilization, we got to know what's in the soil, or, you know, what's going on here. Does it even need to be fertilized? Or if it does, how much should we put down? It's not just you should fertilize your tree. You need to be putting down what you should be, you know, the recommended rates. And the only way to find that out is know the recommended rates as well as what you have in the soil. And you find that out through a test, a soil test. Will it live longer? This will tie into new trees versus mature trees. You know, if we're pushing growth, is that what we want to be doing in the first place? You know, is this going to increase the health and the longevity of the tree? You know, will this cause harm to the plant? Some plants are very sensitive to higher rates of fertilizer. You know, sometimes you hear fertilizer burn. You know, all of this is something to consider while you're putting down the fertilizer. You know, say you have, you know, you're applying it for this particular species, but you know, you have, you know, a very susceptible perennial next to it. Not that, you know, you need to be, you know, broadcasting all over the place, but just be cognizant of, you know, will it cause the plant harm? Also, will this cause the plant harm because it has some other, you know, some other factors? Is there a pest problem that we're fighting? Did the last guy, you know, do herbicide damage by spraying too close to it? Any of these things might be reasons to, you know, just be be wary of what we're doing. And will the fertilizer stay put? So this is really more applicable to real sandy soils, or things that have high movement through the soil. Water soluble stuff tends to move a little faster through the soil, obviously, than the slow release. So say we need to put down 2 pounds per 1,000 square feet per year for this tree. If we know we have a wicked sandy soil, perhaps it'd be a really good idea to break that up into several applications as opposed to dumping 2 pounds of fast release. It's all common sense stuff. It just gotta be sure that we're thinking about it while we're doing this. And to that point, if it moves, where we go? Are we in Indianapolis and we got rivers and lakes all over the place, or are we near a body of water? Is it going into somewhere, or is it out in the plains where there's no water and it's just going down, and maybe the water table is real deep? All of these things. How deep is the water table? You're on the coast, it's fairly shallow. You just want to be cognizant of anytime you put anything in the environment, what's it going to do and where's it going to go. So these are just some real quick ones. Everyone wants to fertilize because it's everyone loves a green tree, and it looks great when you have really good vigor and health. But just some quick ones on when not to fertilize. If you got sufficient levels of all your elements, you don't need to put anything in. Now we're just wasting material by putting it into the soil when there's no need to. And the only way we'd be able to find that out is a soil test. And they're actually really easy to do and get and read. I would highly recommend not doing anything to your soil unless you have a soil test. Also, sometimes you'll have the Ask Albert page, and I feel bad about it. People they'll email me and say, hey, what kind of fertilizer, I want to do this fertilizer for this type of tree. How much do I apply, and what's the deal with that? And without a soil test, the best I can give you is do a soil test, and this is the rate that they say. I feel really unhelpful when I do that, but you can't answer a question if you don't know what it is, and if we don't know how much is in the soil, we can't go forward with that. If you're going to fertilize a tree, if it has any of these issues, you're almost guaranteed to make it work. A lot of the sucking insects, so basically it's growing itself to death. We're invigorating the tree, we're giving it more nutrients, it's growing faster, it's producing more tissue, which is really tempting to a lot of these sucking and piercing bugs because there's more to eat. So we're actually encouraging more pest pressure on that. Whereas if we know that we're battling white flies or Adelgis, aphids, any of the caterpillars, let's not give them more food. Let's control that pest first, and then help the tree recover with a fertilizer afterwards, but not during. Same thing with a lot of the cankers, the fire blights, the bacterial stuff, where you're just ramping up the tree to grow more, and you're pumping all of this, the pathogens through the tree even more. You're really doing more harm than good with in that specific case. Again, treat this first, then help recover with fertilizer. And then herbicides, we were talking about, you sprayed too close, you got a little wind drift, happens to everybody, but especially if it's a systemic pesticide, then as it's growing more nutrients are being taken up, more water and nutrients are going through the tree. So whereas now, without that vigorous growth, all the pesticide residual is contained to this area. Now that we're pumping it through there, it goes through more of the tree and can really cause a lot of damage. Herbicide, it's very important. There's a lot of times that when I was working up in the Northeast at there's a tennis and croquet club, the guys that sprayed herbicides were different than the grounds crew, and they'd nick the trees. They wanted clean edges on the beds, which is understandable, but we had to completely redo our fertilizer program for both the turf and the trees, because if we started pumping it, we're gonna kill all these trees. And especially, you'll see this a lot in new plantings where they'll spray out lines, and they're using a lot of herbicides because they're still under contract. You want to just make sure that you can kill whole trees very quickly with that. I know that this is pretty basic stuff, but it's the same point as the chemicals. This would be all talking the same language. Just a quick and dirty recap here. On every bag of fertilizers, there's the 3 numbers, and that gives you the N, P, and K, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And this allows you to apply the right amount. So if we look into this, and it's always in that order. So we know that in this bag, we have 26% nitrogen, 2% phosphorus, and 11% potassium. In the US, it's not, the phosphorus and potassium isn't pure elemental, but it's close enough for what we're doing. So this is just a quick breakdown of this. Say it's a 50-pound bag. I know that 26% of 50 is 13 pounds, 2% of 50 is 1 pound, and go all through this. So this really, when this will come into the next slide or two, where we're talking about, say we have a mock soil test, what does this mean to us? So what we're spending all the money on is really only 19.5 pounds of the bag. The rest of it is just filler. It's a lot harder to apply small amounts of material over large surfaces. So, that's one reason for filler. Also, they have to make it go together, and the slow release, whether if it's the formula of or the type of nitrogen has a control over that, but also sometimes they'll use coated particles or prills that will augment the release time of the fertilizer, and that also goes into the inert side of it. So 31 pounds of fill. The 3 macronutrients, if you were, that we don't ever have to fertilize for, carbon, oxygen, hydrogen. This is by far what plants use the absolute, or is pumping through their system in a serious way. The macronutrients, so by macronutrients, we don't mean the most important, we just mean these are used in large quantities by the plant. So obviously, your nitrogen, your potassium, your phosphorus, calcium, manganese, and sulfur. Those are, and a lot of times in fertilizers, you'll see those 3 not listed on the obviously the 3 numbers, but if you look at the label on the back, it'll tell you what percentage by weight, all of the ingredients in that, whether you have any of this or not, as well as micronutrients. There's a ton of micronutrients. Since we're not growing in soilless media, or you're not going in a greenhouse often, or potting soil, you're almost guaranteed to not run into a problem with micronutrients, because you need so small amounts of them. They're naturally occurring in the soil. And it's just, chlorine, all of these things you would not necessarily think about. With trees and outdoor grows, we don't really have to worry about them too much. That being said, if you have really sandy soil, you might run into this, and your soil test would show that. And this is if you don't know what you need to apply, ask somebody. We don't want to be just throwing nutrients down. And in some states, it's becoming more and more common where they have phosphorus regulations, because phosphorus is being over applied. Sometimes it's just bound in the soil, and we just need to adjust the pH to get it. Other times we actually need to add phos. But a soil test is key. We don't want to be dumping our money, the customer's money, and hurting the environment as well by putting unnecessary products down in the soil. So we were talking about goals of tree fertilization and when to fertilize, when not to. If if you have established trees, we're talking 2 to 4 pounds per 1,000 square feet a year. You probably would break that into a spring and a fall, just because in the spring we want to use something that's more high nitrogen, low phos, low potassium, just because we're trying to push top growth. In the fall, we want to use just the opposite, lower nitrogen, higher phosphorus, higher potassium, for better root and shoot and all around growth, fruit production as well. Once you have a mature tree, we're not trying to grow a mature tree anymore. It's obviously we want it to grow, but we want to keep it healthy. That's the main goal. So if it's healthy and the soil tests, you're in the range, you're not seeing any nutrient deficiencies, you're not seeing any stunting, you're not seeing any, serious stresses of it, you might not even need to fertilize it. If you were, smaller rate, 2 to 3 pounds per year, but you still might not even need to do that every year. Just be cognizant of what you're trying to do. And then we'll go into young trees here in a minute. But just Not every tree is the same. Not every tree has the same fertilizer requirement. Young trees, we want to encourage rapid growth. We want to get them established. We want to push them. So that's more. That'd be 2 to 6. That'd be higher rates. You want to just be sure that you're not pushing them too hard. You want to make sure that you have good soil conditions, not compacted, all of that. Newly planted trees, you definitely want to do something. The biggest thing to help these trees is the soil preparation. Good soil, high quality soil that's not just clay. It has good organic matter in it. It's suited to the tree's preferences on acidity. It's not compacted. It's appropriate soil growing conditions for this. If the soil test says that you should obviously incorporate it, and incorporating it into the soil and the backfill is the best way to go about this. You could do it with a drench over top, but you're really not going to get the same effect out of it. Also, with newly planted trees, we want to be very careful. A lot of the fertilizers are all salt based. So we don't want to be putting down really high salt content, and you'll see that as well on the fertilizer. So make sure you're easing them in gently. So this is a quick little run through on the soil test. Say the soil test come back to me and I need 2 pounds per 1,000 square feet of nitrogen in the soil. So I've taken the soil samples, I sent it off, they sent it back to me. I know what I need. So we'll always, when we're fertilizing, we want to cover the canopy, so the drip line. So we just take a quick radius on that, or this one they've given it to us in a square, which is just as easy. It actually would be probably a little easier for you. Many ways to measure it. Just make sure that you're accurate and you know where you've marked. If we marked off this square, we don't actually then apply over here where we have non-target application going. So we know that 25 times 30 square feet, you get 750 square feet. This one would just, it could be anything. And then Nick's giving me the snores here. I know it's boring, but not killing trees, very important. So then we just divide that by, we know that we had 26 pounds. So when someone sends an email in and says, what do I need? This would be exactly what I'd send them back to let them know. We talked a little bit about girdling or nutrient disorders and what causes them. It's a plethora of things. This is where you have to be a little bit of a detective to figure out. Girdling roots, we all know what those are. Mower damage, surprisingly terrible to, all that scar tissue, it really helps, or it really hurts the tree's ability to pull up nutrients. Pollution, acid rain, any of these physiological problems will cause the tree's inability to take up the amount of nutrients they need. Insect damage, nematodes, construction and compaction is probably the #1 cause, especially in new plantings, as well as you'll see it a lot on college campuses where, in the common area, people are walking all over the place. Just simply walking over the same spot every day is enough to compact it to cause damage if you have enough people over time. Also, too much soil or too much water, not enough water. All of these can cause the tree's inability to get what it needs. Also, some trees, it's common for guys that aren't paying attention, or homeowners that, I love this tree, it looks really cool in the magazine. They didn't look about what tree the tree's needs were, or where their soil profile is, or is it, they could be putting the wrong tree in the wrong place, and we're already, fighting an uphill battle after that. So just making sure you have the right tree in the right place with the proper conditions is the way to go. So we're just going to cover the 3 main macronutrient deficiencies. Nitrogen, you get a really, really chartreuse looking yellowing. It's mobile in the plant. This is a real key to picking these apart. Basically, trees and plants know what they're doing. So if it's mobile in the plant, that means if you had a tree growing and it was great, and then now we've developed a nutrient deficiency, all the lower leaves would be darker green, the higher up would be more chartreuse, but the higher leaves, the younger leaves are more productive. So the tree knows this, and so because nitrogen is mobile in the plant, it'll send all the nitrogen to the more productive tissue. So you'll see the new tissue being green, the old tissue being yellow. That's a big key to this. You get general chlorosis. We don't see a lot of this just because nitrogen is pretty, prevalent in the system. So, but it's bad when it happens, and customers will certainly give you a call. It's be very easy to spot and treat. Phosphorus also wicked easy to tell. A lot of times it's purple. Depends on which shade of purple it is per tree, but they're almost always purple. You get dark green and then purple. If you can catch it at dark green, you're doing good. Most of the time, it's got to get to purple for people to figure it out. This is in the older leaves also a mobile nutrient deficiency. And this is really bad because it's translocated to the seeds and fruit. So if you have an ornamental tree, you're going to see a lot of damage in the fruit. Phosphorus is certainly very critical in fruit production there, as is potassium. Potassium shows up terribly in palms. You get white spots across the whole thing, necrosis of the edges, and chlorosis of it. It'll first appear in the older leaves. So in palms, you get stem weakening, lodging, which is kind of what this is. This is a terrible potassium deficiency that should have been caught earlier. Some guys, they don't think about potassium being deficient, especially in sandy soils, but that's certainly a dead giveaway for it. As with any of these deficiencies, it's the same idea as a tree being stressed. You're going to increase your risk for pest and disease attack just because it is stressed. And as we mentioned, potassium also pretty important in fruit. You get thin peels on citrus. This is often found in the sand in the warmer climates. You get discoloration and cracking. We covered all the application methods of chemicals, and this is very similar. Injection, soil injection, drench or granular. When we're doing soil injection, all the roots of not all the roots, 90% of the roots of the tree are between the 4 and 8 inch mark down in the soil. People often think that you have really deep rooted trees, but a lot of the feeder roots that are really doing all of the heavy lifting are in that. So obviously when you apply fertilizers, you want to stay below 4 inches but above 8. If it's below.
Sorry about the brief interruption. We had a little bit of a problem. We now have one less employee in our media department, so that's good. Payroll got a little lighter after that mess up. But I think are we back online? Can I get a thumbs up from everybody? Is the audio good on me and Albert?
Yep, is it good?
40 people have found us back, okay. Well, Albert, why don't you recap, go back a slide,
Yep.
catch up, and then we'll finish this through. We've only got a couple more slides left, but we do still have a couple of questions left for the notch chainsaw scabbard.
Yep, and the last slide is, I built in some time here for questions, whether
cool.
it be, relevant or not. If you had something in the first section that you didn't get asked,
Type it into the comments box and
No
Carson
problem.
will assemble a list. There will be a discount code at the end if you stick around, as well as our test for the CEUs. The test is available to ISA certified arborists and non-certified arborists. If you don't have a certified arborist number, just type in some gibberish if you want to take the test just for fun. But you can get your 2 CEUs for watching.
Yep.
It's a 20-question test, pretty run of the mill.
Yeah, basically, the way they want it written is on what we covered, and this is very basic stuff, so it.
Easy way to get 2 CEUs.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Albert. I'm gonna let you get back to it. Okay?
All right. Sorry for that. So just to recap here, the application methods for fertilizer, same idea as the application methods for pesticides, just a little tweak to them. ANSI has a lot to say about how to do subsurface fertilization, whether it be dry fertilization, which is this top piece. This would probably be something to just keep in mind, or you can look up. And the liquid is the same idea, except a little more technical. So the subsurface, obviously you just want to drill holes in a grid pattern. We'll show a picture of that here in a second. And anywhere from 12 to 36 inches is fine. Obviously, 12 inches apart gives you better coverage. 36 inches apart gives you a quicker application. So you just have to, be aware of what you're trying to do that day. And then they also mentioned the 4 to 8 inches deep on the feeder roots. You want to obviously apply this as evenly as you can, whether that be weight per hole. I'm putting in 2 ounces of fertilizer per hole, or I'm doing 6 gallons per hole, whatever the rate is. And then we just did a little math here on just how much more a grid of 12 inches apart is. That's worth 1,000 holes you'd have to on a average tree versus 36 inches hold. 36 inches apart would be a tenth of that. Subsurface liquid fertilization, that's injection is what that is. And so same idea with the 4 to 8 inches, and then the 150 to 200 PSI, that's just so you get good penetration through the soil layers and make sure you get a good spread on it. This is, down here is the idea of the grid you want to use, whether that's, you just want to go from the trunk to the drip line. That's where most of the roots are. Not all the roots, but it's a good place to start. Injections and implants, I get a lot of questions about these, and they are a Band-Aid is what they are. If you can't get fertilizer into a tree any other way, you can't, which would be just very hard. You want to put it in as low as you can in the flare roots to make sure you get good uptake of it. You only want to do it once a year. You don't want to go too crazy with it. You definitely don't want to do anything small diameter, because you're wounding the tree to put injections in, as well as drought stress don't take well to it as well. If you have to fertilize a tree via injection, like trunk injection, this would be like a specimen tree that a really important client needs you to keep alive, and you need time, because what this is telling me is we have more issues. It might be girdling roots, it might be soil compaction, it might be the tree was planted too deep in the first place, and we need to do a crown excavation. There's a million different reasons why I could be doing this, but fertilizing with injection is not the answer. But trunk injection, excuse me, don't do it unless you have to. But it's definitely the soil injection. You get the fertilizer injected, as well as decompaction. Granular, also a great way to go. Drench, fine way. I would stick with those. This one, so water soluble stuff. So that's sprays or drenches you could use. Usually really fast release and short residual. So the faster it releases, the less time. The less time the tree has to take it up. So you might need to do more applications, or just be okay with that as a shorter window. So it's mainly in turf, but we've kind of started getting into it in the arbor world as well. Micronutrients, it's rare, but if you do get a micronutrient issue going, you could certainly use foliar applicated fertilizers, because you need so little. That would be a good way to go about it as well. The dry or granular, this is just your basic way that you would put down fertilizer for your lawn. You're just doing the same thing with the intent that you're gonna be fertilizing your tree. So you still use your soil test, you still use all the same stuff, just the same idea. Also, this would also incorporate what we talked about, the new plants, work it into the soil when you plant new plants, or doing anytime you're doing any excavation to do decompaction, whether that be with an air spade or anything like that. It's a good idea to work in your fertilizer if you're going to do one, with spring or fall during that time. And so that's fertilizer. If you got any questions on that, I will actually take them at the end, just so we can get through this all on time here. The third chapter, this is why you all stuck around, is how to make money, how to bill, how to make this profitable for you. So the question is, why do we even care? Why do we need to think about PHC? So stereotypically, this is the highest profit margin for any applicator in the business, whether it be, you have so much overhead for removals and chippers and climbing gear, and this is all great, and you certainly need to do it, but your profit margins are much better. And we'll do some math here in a bit, just for Nick. why this is important and how actually exciting it can be. It can be done with very little equipment, whether that be injection or just a skid. You could be pulling this around in the back of a regular pickup truck to start with, and then obviously as you increase your book of business, it can get bigger. But just start out, it's very low cost, very low barrier to entry. It's a great way to just try it out. Less physically demanding. Obviously, we all want to be, doing what, in this industry as long as we can, and climbers, it's hard. I mean, I don't have to tell you that. But as you get older, if you don't want to be climbing up in the trees as much, this is a great way to still maintain your customers, still be in the industry, and maybe give yourself a break. Maybe you climb 3 days a week and do 2 days of plant health care, or see what, how you feel about it. But it's much less physically demanding. The most physically demanding part is, the unloading and loading the chemicals or dragging a hose. It's very low impact. And then it also opens options for you to be on a single property multiple times a year. I do your pruning for you. I can also do any pests that come up, and then I can be on there too, if the tests deem it, spring and fall for. It's a good way to stay in front of your customer and, maintain these customers, especially if you have high competition. It sets you apart from everybody else. And then low labor costs. It's not brain surgery, so it's pretty easy to get going through. So show me the money. This is the math that Nick loves so much. You can start. The money math is exciting. It's super cheap to get started. We just picked. There's a million ways you can do it. You can do it with Moget, you can do it with TreeTech, you can do it with spray chemicals in a skid steer or a skid spray. All of these are options. I just picked what I think would be the cheapest way to get into it and the easiest way that you can make the most money. So that would be a Tree IV 2-pack. You can do any application well with that system, and then you could add to it or subtract to it. But either way, that's a great starter kit. So especially since EAB is so big, and it's probably the number one chemical that we deal with here, we're just doing the math on this. Also, it's great because it requires low labor. So an application will cost $250 an inch for you. So once you buy the product and you buy the plugs, the actual what you're putting into the tree is $250 an inch. So that's what it costs you. But if you can usually bill it for $10 to $14 an inch, depending on your area. So like where I'm at in North Carolina, it's not as affluent as many other places. So I'm closer to the $10 an inch. Up in New York or in the Northeast where there's more money, it'd be closer to the $14 an inch. So that leaves you like $11.50 an inch in profit. Obviously you have to pay yourself and there's labor in there, but that's a pretty good place to start. So just if we did one bottle of triage, we'll actually do more than this, but 210 inch trees. So it costs you, I'm sorry, this would be a case of triage. It costs you $5,000 for all the plugs, all the product. But you get a bill, $50,000 at $10 an inch.
That's $45,000 in profit.
It's $45,000 in profit, which.
How long does it take me to do those 200 trees?
When I do it, if you look at and I'm not a production guy, so that being said, if you're getting good uptake and you have everything squared away, I can do a 10-inch tree, walk up to the tree, measure it, get it all going, 15 to 20 minutes. If it's wicked slow, then call it.
200 trees times 20 minutes, 4,000 minutes.
Yeah.
4,000 divided by 60 is what?
Oh, I thought you were gonna tell me.
It's about 60, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's about 60, 65 hours, 70 hours to bill 50 grand.
Yeah.
That's not so bad.
No, it's pretty easy to do as well, and the math works out. So just another trick to that, especially with EAB, all these, it's easy to just. Here's the quote. Here's what it's going to cost me. You guys kind of balk at the $14 an inch. But if I can say, hey man, this is going to be $140 to save this tree, or I don't know what $1,000 to remove it.
$500, who cares?
It's
a big difference.
They got to save their tree. They got to keep their property value, and save money.
Yeah.
So all of this is the no matter if it's injection or what, this is the way, I get a lot of questions on how to bill. This is how you do it. Figure out your cost of material, whatever you need. So we did that on the last slide in dollars per inch. You could do the same thing with sprays.
Sure.
Figure out what it costs. Determine your market price. That's that range we gave you, that $10 to $14. And the easiest way to do this, just call your competition. Hey man, what are you charging for, I got a tree, what are you gonna charge to treat this? They're gonna tell you.
Or they're gonna say they don't have any idea how to treat it.
Yeah, and then you're getting market intel as well. But if you're the only guy in town, your first couple customers will tell you if you're too high or not. Consider the time it takes to apply, just like we did there. It takes me 30 minutes. You know, a spray might take you 30 minutes to mix it up and 20 to 40 minutes, depending on the size of the tree, to put it out. Just go easy into this. Take it, you know, say, all right, Fridays are our PHC days. I'm going to learn. And then, you know, you got to build in upkeep on equipment and licenses. So like my license, my commercial applicator's license for North Carolina is like $50 a year. So as long as I make sure that I bill that extra $50, someone else should pay for my license. I shouldn't.
Sure.
You know, and the upkeep on the equipment every year, just new O-rings, new valves, new whatever it needs. Just you can build that into the price. It shouldn't be much. So pretty easy on that. And then just work from your cost to the final billing. It costs me X dollars to have this treatment.
Cost of materials, labor, upkeep.
Absolutely.
That's easy.
And then subtract out what do I want to make.
Perfect.
So just a recap here. Chemicals, how to choose them, how to apply them. That was the first one. I think there was a bunch of questions on that. Basics, the fertilizer, it's basics. There's certainly more to be covered on this, but this is a good way to get started in making sure that everybody's in the same boat here. And then how to actually monetize this. It's not hard. If you just decide I'm going to do this and go out and pick one product and pick an easy start.
Triage EAB.
Just you could really we got a 50 grand in essentially 2 weeks of work.
Sure.
So, and you can do this on windy days, slow days, figure it out. So that's what we got, and now we're doing questions here. I think we're figuring out the questions right now.
Alrighty, so all 5 of our official questions are out. The guys already picked a winner, so I'll announce that in just a minute. We do have a plant healthcare coupon, so I'll just tell you guys about that. I'm sure Kel will put it on the screen here in a minute, but it's PHC PLZ. PHC, please. So PHC PLZ, that's 15% off all PHC, all books, all education, all training materials. So go for it. Go buck wild, guys. It'll only be on until tomorrow.
Okay.
So if you don't take advantage of it between now and tomorrow, it won't work, I promise you. If you call in 2 days, they're not going to give it to you. I told them not to. We're not allowed to do sales on most of this PHC stuff, so it's kind of secret. So yeah, use it before 11:59 p.m. tomorrow. PHC, please, for 15% off. I've got a couple of questions here from some of the people that were watching.
Yep.
Kayla Wheeler wants to know, what do you recommend for soil testing in the field if you want to do it yourself? Do I have like a little kit for the pool that I can shake up?
You could do, if you were just looking for a pH, you could do that. But as far as how much phosphorus and potassium is in the soil, that has to be sent off to the lab.
But a basic pH test I can do? And
absolutely.
We don't sell that. How do I buy something like that?
Amazon has good ones, and they're cheap. They're like $5.
Soil pH test on Amazon, $5. Do it.
And then the nitrogen, just so when you get it back, I forgot to mention this. Nitrogen is so mobile and it moves and changes so rapidly in the soil. You can't actually, if I send a soil sample in, they will not tell me how much nitrogen is in my soil, because by the time it gets to them, it has changed.
Yep.
And then by the time it gets back to me, it's different again. So they ask you what you're using it for. So what you're using it for is ornamental trees, and now they're going to recommend the same 2 to 4 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet.
Got it.
Based on your soil pH.
Very cool. Kenny Phillips What if the drip line falls on a neighbor's property? What do I do then, Albert?
Do I just do it to it?
I mean, it seems like you could just ask if it was me, I'd ask, hey man, I'm treating this tree. I got 75% of it. I want to do a good job. You're going to get benefit out of this too. Would you mind if I eased in on that last quarter? If they say no, I mean, you got to respect the property lines and then just
Or come back later.
cut the rate by 75.
Kenny, I think it makes a big difference as to who's home. Is your client home? Is the neighbor home? I think you should play that one respectfully though, and definitely check with your neighbor.
Who's going to say no? Hey, can I improve the tree health that's not going to fall on your house now?
Don't mind if pets they could be worried about. It could be, there are a lot of reasons.
If they watch this, then you'd be able to accurately.
We'll just have to have them watch
Yeah.
this. Brandon Morton wants to know, should we apply a product such as NutriRoot along with a fertilizer? I'm going to answer this one.
I feel like I have this answer.
Okay.
That's highly situational. It's going to depend on what you want to achieve,
What you're trying to treat, and what the conditions are. And
Absolutely.
it's hard to answer that one without knowing the exact specific case, right?
That's true. NutriRoot it has a lot of humectants and humates in it, so it's really good for drought conditions. If you have a drought condition, I would certainly do that.
I was going to mention the humectants.
Yeah, it pulls water to it. It almost has no fertilizer in it. I think it's a 2-4-1, or I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's very mild. I would, go for it.
Awesome. Well, so we did the PHC, please. 15% off PHC PLZ. Good till 11:59 tomorrow.
We thanked Albert for rushing across the country to get here and then running in the door.
We have the quiz. The quiz link is going up now. Carson just reminded me. It'll also be posted in a separate comment outside of this video. Okay. The quiz link will be up for a couple of days. Then we take it down. Then we send the results to the ISA. Sometimes it takes them 2 to 3 weeks. So if you don't see your CUs right away, don't freak out. You're going to apply for CUs for teaching this, right?
I believe I do get them for teaching
you
this.
have to. So Albert will be waiting for his CUs just like you guys. So yeah, just wait for those. You can always shoot us an email if you feel like you need to check media@treestuff.com. Do take the test. There's always questions in there about how we can better improve these. Please do give us your feedback. We really appreciate that. Obviously, we have our Ask Albert. You can send an email to me or phc@treestuff.com. That goes directly to Albert's inbox. And Albert does his best to get those answered right away. He's on the road sometimes, so we try to give him a little bit of leeway, not too much. So if you ever have a PHC question, you can send pictures of something. He'll help you diagnose it. Even if you just want to say hi or thanks, phc@treestuff.com will get you directly a hold of Albert. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. As always, I'd like to thank the ISA for supporting us in these endeavors.
Absolutely.
And giving us the CEUs. I'd like to thank everybody for watching, and I can't tell you guys how excited I am about all of the webinars that we're going to get done here in the next couple months. We've got a ton of really cool stuff planned. I'm talking to Rock Exotica and Sterling, both about factory tours, possibly going through and seeing how carabiners are made and rope and stuff like that.
Very cool.
So that's exciting. We're talking to Taylor about doing another one potentially, and doing some stuff outside. So that's really exciting. And of course, we'll be broadcasting Capture the Canopy and Jambo this year.
Very cool.
So
and fall. We got a fall PHC one.
and we have a fall PHC one, Albert, take 3. Yeah. All right, let's give this away. Appreciate everybody who participated in our interaction experiments. We were working on the titler. It didn't go super smoothly the whole time, but we did get it. So who won this one? From Lincoln, California, it's going to be Amy Ellis. Amy, if you PM us or send an email to media@treestuff.com, that'll make it easier for us to find you. If you're not still watching, you may be out of luck. I don't know, but we'll find out. So, Albert, thanks so much to the audience. Thank you guys, to Cale and Carson, the gentleman behind the booth. Thank you to Ricky, who brought Albert here and is actually on his way back to bring Albert back his suitcase. And he came back last month when we did the webinar. He had to come back because we didn't have the keys to lock the building.
He's
So,
the real
yeah,
MVP.
both during IU games, both times. He's not super pleased, but he's doing it. So that's us, treestuff.com, TreeU, signing out.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Snail!